Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome. As you are coming in, I'm just going to welcome everybody and let people come in, and do feel free, as we always do at these events at Hatch. We welcome anybody who wants to drop into the chat. Let us know if you'd like. If you're pregnant, if you have a baby, where you live, if you like, anything you'd like to share with us, or just to feel, sometimes it can be really nice to realize you're sitting amongst other people. It also lets us know that you're able to hear us. I'm going to throw up a poll and we'll do some introductions in a moment, but feel free to let us know where you are, whether you're pregnant or have a baby. We've got a lot of, hey, thank you. Hey, Julia. Welcome, 33 weeks pregnant from Massachusetts. Welcome. So we have some people in their second trimester. We have a good amount of people in their third trimester, and we have somebody with a baby under a month old. So welcome. Thank you for coming out tonight. All right. And we have somebody with a baby 1 to 3 months old. Welcome, 3 weeks postpartum in Canada. It's always exciting. Often, yes, welcome. The Hatch community extends. We do see a lot of people coming in from around the US and sometimes in Canada, which is exciting. So thank you, everybody who has come out tonight. My name is Jada Shapiro. I'm the founder of Boober, which is a platform where expectant parents and new families can find all of their classes and on-demand care providers like birth doulas, postpartum doulas, lactation consultants, mental health therapists, very important, we're going to be talking about tonight, who specifically focus on pregnancy and postpartum, nutritionists, sleep professionals, pelvic floor therapists, all of that. So we really aim to be a resource to the community. We've been working with Hatch for a long time. So I want to say thank you to Hatch. I used to teach in person in the New York City store, sometimes in LA. And it's been great to be able to support all of you throughout this whole year and change since the pandemic, where we've really ramped up the amount of programming that we can do for expectant and new parents. And Hatch has been a wonderful partner in creating a lot of opportunities to discuss really important topics. Like tonight's topic, which we are talking about. You may have noticed the title did focus specifically on anxiety and perinatal anxiety. And we're also going to kind of broaden as well and just discuss in general PMADs, postpartum mood and anxiety disorders, but postpartum depression and anxiety, and bring that up and really talk about, since it is Maternal Mental Health Month. And so I'm going to introduce very briefly our guest speakers tonight, and then I'm going to let them introduce themselves more. And we have some questions from you in advance. I have a bunch of questions, but anybody who's here today, feel free to drop into the question box down at the bottom if you have any questions for our panelists as well. So I wanted to first welcome Jabina Coleman, LSW, MSW, CLC, and IBCLC, lactation consultant. Jabina is a lactation consultant and psychotherapist and national speaker spearheading the call to action. Everyone wants to hold the baby. Who will hold the mother? So that's a really good jumping off point for tonight. And I'm going to drop in the chat where you can find both of them as well. And we also have Olivia Bergeron, LCSW, who's a psychotherapist and parent coach who founded Mommy Groove Therapy and Parent Coaching to help parents successfully navigate the huge changes that come with having a child. A mom to twins and a singleton, Olivia understands the demands that come with parenting, especially in New York City, but we say all over now because we are able to help everybody in a broader way. So I would really actually love to give the floor to you both to introduce yourselves and talk about your work and who you are. So we'll start with Jabina.
Jada, thank you so much for having me in this space. And good evening, everyone. My name is Jabina Coleman. As mentioned, I'm a reproductive psychotherapist and a board certified lactation consultant. Wear many hats, but the work that I do, I am a mother, I'm a parent of two with personal and professional experience around perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And I have founded a few organizations that one, breastfeeding awareness and empowerment, which supports new parents around with a framework of reproductive justice, trauma-informed care, and PMADS, and the president and co-founder for Perinatal Mental Health Alliance for People of Color, which is also a part of a larger organization, which is an international organization, Postpartum Support International. And so I am excited to be here, excited to share and talk with you all today.
Thank you. Excited to have you here. And Olivia.
Hi, well, hello, everybody. And thank you so much to Jada, to Hatch, and nice to see you, Jabina. So I'm a psychotherapist and a parent coach, as Jada mentioned. And I got started working with both pregnant and new families just because I saw there was a real dearth of help. My daughter was 2 when my twins were born. So I just saw that there was, again, a real big need for support. And I didn't see a lot out there. So, obviously, at least in the New York City area, there's certainly lots of psychotherapists. But I do think if you're not taking into account the specific context of having a child and not doing it during a pandemic, I just think you're missing a big piece. So I think it is really important to seek out, if you do need help, seek out perinatal specialists, just because they get it in a way that some other therapists just do not. And so I think it is really incumbent upon us, as professionals too, to be reaching out to people and to let people know that there's help, that this is, if you're anxious or depressed, this is very, very treatable. There's certainly things that we can do so you don't have to suffer. I think, unfortunately, I don't know if you guys see this or if you experienced it, if you're in the audience, people kind of white knuckle it for a really long time until they eventually maybe hit a wall and then they reach out for help. So I'm hoping that with this information that we're going to give you guys today, maybe people will be encouraged to seek help before they hit that wall. But even if you have already, please do know that there's certainly things that you can do, that you don't need to suffer, that this is very, very treatable. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much to both of you. So it is Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month, and I guess if we could just kind of start in the broadest sense, can you both speak a little bit about why do we have this month, and or why are we sitting here recognizing this? It doesn't have to necessarily be about a month. It feels like there's a new month and a new day all the time that gets labeled something, right? And then we don't want to actually just be like, well, it's May. I think it's helpful that they have these months, right? So that we can kind of create, it allows this opportunity to create awareness. But of course, we want to be talking about all of this much more of the time. But why this month? Let's talk a little bit about it.
I think, as you mentioned, right, we want to bring awareness, but I think the reason for having Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month is, one, because it's the #1 medical complication related to childbearing women and people. It's also detectable and treatable. And so it's really important for us to share awareness around PMADS and maternal mental health. Also because I know recently, in the most recent study in Philadelphia around maternal mortality rates, 50% of the women have a mental health diagnosis. And so it's really important to share this information so that folks have access to resources and support and not experience this alone.
I think absolutely, just piggybacking on that. I mean, we know who's at risk, we know how to screen, and we know how to treat them. So, I mean, there's really, no excuse for us in the professional realm not to be, matching people up and getting the help, make sure they get the help that they need. But I think that it is, I mean, when we say it's the #1 medical complication, it's not diabetes, it's not preeclampsia, all these things that I think, we have in our minds as being much more of a threat, a danger. But it's just not the case. This is very, very common. And I think that I'm hoping that when we get that information out there, it takes away some of that stigma, that people don't feel like, well, I'm the only one that's experiencing this. What's wrong with me? As opposed to, and I think that this is not your fault. If you do experience PMADS, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, it's a mouthful, so people kind of abbreviate it as PMADS, that this is not, you're not to blame. And there's something that you can do about it. So I think oftentimes, we kind of self-flagellate, oh gosh, this is happening to me, I did something wrong. As opposed to, okay, this is happening to me and it's not my fault and there's something I can do about it. So I think, and I agree, Jada, that, why do we need a month? Unfortunately, to kind of draw people's attention to this as an issue. I wish it were, year round, certainly. Every day we're Mental Health Awareness Day. But that being said, it's a good opportunity for us to kind of educate people and let them know how common this is, and that what you can actually do about it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Let's tell our audience here, let's talk a little bit about what are some of the typical symptoms somebody might experience if they're having perinatal, anxiety or postpartum anxiety, and or depression. Let's round out both of them. If you could both speak a little bit about what they might experience.
So I do think what a lot of people are very familiar with or hearing the term around baby blues. And so I think to address baby blues in a sense, and how that is a bit different from postpartum depression and or anxiety, right? And so we're thinking about baby blues, which likely comes on very suddenly in the first few weeks, maybe 1 to 2 weeks postpartum. And the difference between postpartum blues or depression is like the severity, the timing, and the duration of it. And so thinking about how long it's lasting, and how if you're unable to bounce back, right? And then when we think about postpartum anxiety or depression, there are symptomatically, there are different symptoms and they last a little bit longer. So in the event you return back to your 6-week postpartum appointment and you're still having symptoms of feeling bluesy, tearfulness, not feeling engaged, maybe feeling some symptoms of anxiety, racing thoughts, just really not feeling yourself and you can't shake it. There might be, for some your providers to do a more extensive evaluation around symptoms. And Olivia, you can share.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the difference between the baby blues and postpartum depression or anxiety, the baby blues, the literature will say between 50 and 80% of people experience it. I say it's closer to 100%, because what is it? It's transient moodiness. People are kind of laughing through their tears. They're all over the place. It's really about hormones. We see this. It's across history. It's across cultures. It's not just an American experience people have. And they say when the milk comes in, the tears aren't far behind. So usually, day 3 to day 5, their hormones kind of crash because you've had those pregnancy hormones for 40 odd weeks. All of a sudden, they're not there anymore. So people really, they hit that wall and they're just kind of all over the place. And so, to Jabina's point, if that does last more than 10 days or so at a time, and if you're seeing it after around the 4 to 6 week mark, then we know that's not really baby blues anymore. And that's something a little more serious and it needs to get looked at. I think in terms of the symptoms that I see most often for something more serious than the baby blues, guilt, anger. People are very, they feel guilty about how, they're not a good enough parent. They're angry at the situation, which I think surprises people as a symptom. I see that really, really common. They're just so frustrated. They lash out at the partners. They lash out at, the doctors. They lash out at the people around them. They just can't. They can't settle down. They just feel like so, just upset and unable to kind of. Yeah. So it's not. I think we think of depression, postpartum depression, as being kind of, mopey or not able to get out of bed, which does happen certainly for some folks. But I do see much more that anxiety, that kind of, again, that anger reaction. It's an agitated depression. So people are really, they're amped up again, they're ready to fight. And one of the symptoms that I see a lot as well is inability to sleep, or real difficulty kind of settling down. Their minds are racing, they're kind of going all over the place, and it's hard for them to kind of to rest. And I know that one of the questions that was asked early on, and you mentioned that from a participant, was, when does the inability to sleep, when is that an issue? Because you ask a new parent, are you tired? They're going to say yes, pretty much across the board. When is that an issue? Is when they do have a chance to sleep and they can't go to sleep. That indicates when your mind is racing, you're all over the place, you can't settle down. You're very future focused, thinking about all the bad things that are going to happen, and assuming that they will happen, as if you have a crystal ball. And so, that to me is a big distinction. And as Jabina said, the duration, the frequency, the intensity of the symptoms. Again, being fatigued, okay, that's a pretty common symptom. If the fatigue is either not restful, or you're not able to actually go to sleep, then that's indicative of a problem.
Thank you. What do you think, could you share, you talked a little bit before, you said there are some, we know what risk factors may be. Can you both speak a little bit about the risk factors ahead of time that somebody might, who's pregnant, how would they know that they might be at risk?
The number one would be a history of postpartum depression or anxiety in the past.
Mhm.
What does your second go around being pregnant and you've had that experience for the first time around, and the flag should be going up. You should be very aware and kind of scaffolding yourself, making sure you've got the support lined up that you need, because the chance that you're going to experience that again, it's not a guarantee, but it's much higher than the general population. So that's one of the major risk factors. If you are, if you've had a C-section, that's a risk factor. If you've had a traumatic birth, that's a risk factor. And mind you, trauma is in the eye of the person who experienced it. So, you might not view that birth as traumatic, but the person that went through it did, and that's what counts, of course. Let's see, if there is a conflict with the partner, if they've recently gone through a divorce, they've had a recent new job, or they've moved. And I know so many pregnant families that, they get new jobs and they go move. Seems to be a thing to do when you're pregnant. And so those stressors add a lot of pressure on, onto the family, certainly. Some other risk factors. If you have a perfectionistic tendency, and if you're kind of rigid personality-wise, I mean, New York City's full of perfectionistic type A people. Who are you, right? I think most cities are, kind of draws that kind of personality. That really does lend itself to that. Again, I feel like I'm failing across the board. I'm not able to kind of succeed in any realm here. I'm letting my child down, I'm letting everybody else down. And so, I often tell people, there is no perfect. Being a parent, you just have to set that aside because it's just not achievable. So what else? I think that there are certain biological or genetic predispositions too. So if you have a family history of anxiety, depression, if you have a personal history of anxiety, depression in the past, these are all risk factors. Again, not a lock, not a guarantee that you'll experience this, but they tend to be more indicative that you might have issues. Of course, there's also environmental issues and social factors as well. Low socioeconomic status. Teen mothers are also really at a high rate for experiencing depression or anxiety. If you're a parent to multiples, like I am, it puts you at a higher rate for experiencing depression or anxiety. So again, all these are risk factors. They're not causative. So just because that was your experience doesn't mean you're definitely going to experience depression or anxiety. But it should be kind of raising flags for you and making sure that you're getting the support that you need lined up ahead of time, ideally.
Yeah, thank you. Jabina, do you have anything you wanted to add? Or
no, I think Olivia covered it. I think when we also think about generational trauma, collective trauma, also thinking about the pandemic currently. So a lot of the collective trauma that many of us are experiencing living in the pandemic, we've seen increased in folks experiencing changes in mood during and after pregnancy.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe, can we talk a little bit about, it feels like we're still dealing so much with stigma of mental health, right? Or this idea of that if I want to feel like something's not right, not if I want to feel, if I feel like something's not right in myself when I'm a new parent, it's very hard and scary to reach out, right? Because we're afraid of what that means if I were to tell somebody that I'm not doing well. Does that mean like am I not able to take care of my baby? What if I'm having certain thoughts, but I am able to take care, or I'm worried that somebody is going to judge me as unable to care for my baby? I think there's a lot of real fear, and for that is justified for many people dealing with, especially in our older generations. It seems like we didn't deal with mental health at all, and so you may not have any support within your family. And I think within different communities there can be different stigmas. So I would love to hear if both of you could speak a little bit around the stigma and what are we doing? What are you doing to help break that down? What do we need to be doing more of? Like having talks like this, I hope. But if you could just address that a little.
Yeah, I think in terms of stigma, and I work a lot with the Black community, right? So there are things that we just don't talk about. One is this idea of being an unfit parent and an unfit mother, and the societal pressures around that. But then culturally, not this is motherhood, this is parenthood, and this comes with the job, and this is how you move through it, right? However, I think, we see oftentimes in media, right, the good parts to parenthood, the smiles, the cuddles, and all of that, but we don't see the tears, we don't see the dark nights, the sleepless nights. And so really being transparent around what it really looks like. Oftentimes when I do a lot of talks, folks are shocked that I share my experience around postpartum depression and postpartum OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. We talk about type A personalities, right? And this is something that wasn't assessed, diagnosed, or treated. And my son is 17. And so really, creating a space to, be transparent about what the experiences are, especially, as Olivia mentioned, for those who, as you said, trauma is in the eye of the beholder, but for those who are experiencing, traumatic births and experiences, yeah. And so.
Yeah, I just think, again, to kind of echo that, I think exposing people, letting people know realistically what birth and new parenthood is like. And unfortunately, if you think it's all sunshine and rainbows, which I think it tends to be, the pictures on Facebook. No, but I tell people this all the time. You don't see the pictures, the after part of the picture. People are only posting the good ones. They're not posting the ones where they got spit up on them and they're a hot mess. We're seeing it as a very kind of curated vision of what parenthood is like, and it's just not realistic. So I do hope that people are, how do you address that? Hopefully being more open, being more honest, being more upfront about, what new parenthood actually looks like, and not sugarcoating it and not kind of, idealizing it as some perfect experience. Because I think that, to Jabina's point, if you are believing that everybody else is having an easier time, what's wrong with me? And so there's a sense that, everybody is, again, it's a piece of cake for for people, that they're coming in contact with, for Facebook, now it's all virtual. And that for them, again, why am I not having such a good time? Why am I, unable to quiet my mind, and I can't enjoy this? I should be happier. I should be able to sleep. I should be, overjoyed that I have this child. And if I'm not, then something wrong with me. So whenever I catch somebody using a lot of shoulds, to me that represents, it's a lot of judgment. And if you take that and make it a could, simple semantics, I guess. But you could be feeling happy about being a parent right now, or you could not. And that's okay. The corollary that's okay too is important. But I do think that there is, I think, less and less stigma, but there's certainly stigma still definitely very present. And so I do think, for all the folks that are in attendance here, if you can portray a realistic image and not fake it, in other words. And let people know, again, it is, there are fantastic parts to being a new parent, but there's also a lot of challenges. Right. And if you're not, again, forthright about that, if you think that, again, we're kind of transmitting this expectation that everything's going to be smooth sailing all the time, that's just not life. I think it just set people up for these false expectations. And again, what's wrong with me? Because it's not like that.
Yeah. So how often would you recommend? I mean, the more I think about it, I guess, and the more, like, I wish I had started therapy or been exposed to therapy much earlier in my life. I didn't get to see a therapist till I was 28, but I think it's like the best thing in the world. And I'm really happy that I went to therapy, even though my whole family is anti-therapy, I would say. Hi, family, if you're watching. But, I think that, and that's okay. And I realized, like, okay, that's fine. Because for me, it's been really supportive and helpful. And most of the people I know now are in some form of therapy, at least in my generation and younger. And two of my kids have asked to see therapists, which I thought was amazing, because like they knew that was a possibility because we talk about it. How much do you think, there are a lot of expectant parents here, and I've just been thinking about it a lot. Like anytime you're doing any major life change, it's supportive to talk to somebody because you're going through a huge transition, and like, however it shakes out, pregnancy is and having a baby is a huge transition. So do you wish people would come and see you when they're pregnant, even if they're feeling okay? Like I guess, how do you know when it's time to reach out for help, but how do you also do it in a self-care kind of way where you're like, maybe people are worried about having to go to therapy for, and dig into their childhood and like do 15 years of therapy. Right. And I want us to like part of like why I think for me, it's important to have mental health therapists on the Bupa platform even is like, I'm like, I want to make it a thing where you could see somebody once or twice or a few times or long-term if that's what you need, but really create the space to like have a conversation with a person once, if that's what would be supportive for you, or do more. I don't know. Okay. That was a lot I just said, but I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think that, so before folks like kind of take that leap, because oftentimes it is a leap to start therapy, I say find a group. Find a group of moms or new parents that you can build some type of relationship rapport with, right? So when people oftentimes think about like, if I'm struggling, I have to go directly to therapy, there are some steps before therapy. And speaking to the folks, like you said, like your family is like anti-therapy, there are a lot of folks that are still like tiptoeing around, like, I don't want to, sit on the couch or whatever their reason being is. And so what I find for some people to kind of ease their way into, let me see what I can do, where are my resources in my community, what kind of resources I can pull together. And oftentimes it's another group of people that have very shared experiences. And then for therapy, as you mentioned, in the event that you might need a little bit more, folks who have worked with me currently and in the past, it's like therapy is the vibe. Like we start, it doesn't have to dig deep in your childhood. We don't have to start there. Like start where you are today. And I think when you're thinking about a therapist, you want to get a therapist that you can relate to, right? And that you feel comfortable with. So interviewing your therapist and doing it not, and I often tell folks who are pregnant, to, maybe trying to get a therapist beforehand and, do your research then, because sometimes you don't have the energy and you're not in the right space in the postpartum period if you're experiencing any mood changes then. And so for folks even planning, right? So around family planning, you might want to kind of, survey your friends and family members who are in therapy and have a therapist to say, who do you work with? What do you like most about them? And just having something in your back pocket around, for a therapist.
Yeah, excellent points. For me, I find that reminding people getting help is an indication of strength, not a weakness. And of knowing yourself and of knowing that, okay, like I need some, like you go to a doctor for something, you go to a professional for, a mechanic or these people that, that specialize in helping you in these discrete ways. I think that, again, it's certainly not indicative there's something wrong with you because you don't know how to fix your car. Instead it's, you're kind of matching yourself up and getting the help that you need. And again, it's efficient, makes sense. So I really think that also, I ask people frequently, like, well, would you want your child to kind of go it alone? Or would you want to demonstrate to them that, again, that reaching out for help is the way to go? It's not a demonstration of weakness. I think knowing yourself well enough and to know that, okay, I need some help right now. We were not meant to do this by ourselves. When they say it takes a village, this is what we're talking about, right? We need as much help as we can get. And I think, unfortunately, frequently, at least in this area, I'm sure in a lot of the urban areas, people are away from their families of origin. So you don't have that built-in level of support. You don't have that network in place necessarily. So building that out, through doulas, through therapists, through lactation consultants, I think is a really nice way to kind of to build out your tribe. That being said, I think Jabina's point about finding places to socialize, finding your tribe is so essential. Nobody understands like another pregnant or new parent. Even parents that have had kids, you forget, it gets foggy this whole period. So if you can find a community of folks with whom you can go through this time together, I think it makes a big difference. In the New York City area, people, there are different Google groups, and there's Yahoo groups, and there's Facebook groups for people in each neighborhood, basically geared for parents. And that's a nice place to post and get information out there and kind of see if there are people with whom you connect with. I also think that just because somebody's a parent doesn't mean you're going to click. So taking some time to find your tribe, find the people with whom you have a rapport that you kind of get along with. I think that sometimes taking baby classes, if you're taking baby gyms, or back in the day, before times, people did that much more often. I think things are going to open up soon, hopefully. But finding ways, that you can connect to other parents and kind of, again, build out your tribe, that makes a really big difference. And in terms of, the self-care, I think needs to be underscored, the importance of self-care. I think that, being able to socialize with the parents, which during this pandemic has been a real challenge. It's been really hard, and people feel, already I think new parents feel pretty isolated. Coronavirus has made it that much harder, because you don't feel safe going outside, you don't feel safe seeing other people. And so that's really made people really isolate. So again, it's made it much harder to connect with other folks. Again, hopefully things are opening up, fingers crossed. But I do think that I can speak to self-care if that's okay.
Yeah, please. Sounds great. Good segue.
Just the importance. And I think that, Jabina mentioned, when you seek out a therapist, interviewing them, making sure that there's a connection, that you feel comfortable and confident in their abilities. I think that the emphasis that I place in a lot of times when I'm working with folks, is self-care. That's really the base of the pyramid. And there are certainly different kinds of therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy and psychodynamic therapies. But I do think that starting in the here and the now is really important. And that sometimes means that as a therapist, it's almost like you're acting like a little bit like a mom. And that I ask folks, in the initial session, oftentimes, are you drinking enough water? How are you sleeping? Let's talk about your sleep hygiene. Are you eating regularly? Are you taking showers? Are you getting outside every day? Are you getting dressed? These are really basic things that you probably wouldn't ask, other populations. But for this population, because the self-care is such a challenge, people tend to take fantastic care of their babies and really not so great care of themselves, unfortunately. So making sure they're building that back in, again, the self-care piece is just essential. Yeah, are they taking their vitamins? Are they, are they finding time to meditate, if that's what they do? Time for fun. So again, these kind of these basic ways, I think that you can work that hopefully into their day-to-day to make them feel a little better. But I do think the self-care is really important. And so, the self-care coupled with the cognitive behavioral therapy, which is really about the here and the now. We don't need to dive into your childhood per se, unless you want to do that. But oftentimes I think starting with right now, how do we get you feeling better fast? That's always my goal as a therapist. People don't have time. They don't have time to waste, not feeling good. So making sure that they're making those taking concrete steps to start back on that path is really important, for them and for their children.
Yeah. How do you know? That was really great. And I think we're going to continue. We'll do some more on that for sure, because I think really checking it, developing the self-care concept, I think that's really hard for a lot of us, especially those who are perfectionist and, have a high drive, right? How to really feel like you're doing something of value when it's just for yourself. And I think that's something, that a lot of people really do struggle with, even though, so how we can help like prescribe this to ourselves, almost as I've started to think about these things as a prescription, almost like the doctor would tell you to do X, Y, Z, right? Or take this medicine, and we would take this medicine. So actually literally stopping and like taking 3 breaths is medicine, right? Or putting on music and laying down. Like I sometimes as a postpartum doula with clients who are struggling with letting go to go to sleep, I might tell them like, how about don't go to sleep, but I do want you to get horizontal, right? Like sometimes just getting horizontal and putting on music or listening to comedy or something that's like takes their brain elsewhere almost, but being like, oh, you are actually allowed to listen to something that makes you laugh for 5 minutes, even if you could you just allow yourself 5 minutes? And I think that giving us like little baby steps, can be helpful, where we're like, oh, that was nice. And it was only 5 minutes, so it's okay. And it really like resets you.
I think starting small like that is really important. Taking kind of, bite-sized pieces of the self-care. And I also think it's self-reinforcing. So if you do lay down for the 5 minutes, it does feel good, and you have more patience for the rest of the afternoon because you took 5 to lay down, then you're more likely to keep doing that. Maybe expand it to 7 and 10 minutes. You know what I mean? But I think that, giving yourself permission to do that, again, it's not, self-care is not selfish. And I'm afraid, again, when I come across an awful lot of folks where they feel like that's being selfish. I don't have the right to do that. I shouldn't, and I shouldn't need this break. I should be able to kind of power through and do this, and if I can't, what's wrong with me? So I do think that, encouraging folks to again, to take the time, even like bite-sized pieces, and I often ask people, what do you do for fun? And what can you do today for fun? What are you going to use that 5 minutes to do? Something that makes just you feel good, because people are giving out energy all day long. They're taking care of the child, they're taking care of the household, their partner sometimes, their families. And I think, again, if you're not refilling your own cup and your cup is always dry, then eventually, you're no good to anybody. And so it does pay dividends. I do think that, that making sure you are building that in a practical, doable way. Obviously, you're not jumping on a plane to Fiji, doing something terribly exotic or complicated or long. But again, what makes you feel good? If chewing gum, blowing bubbles makes you feel good, well, get a pack of gum. If listening to music or podcasts makes you feel good, by all means. But finding small things that you can do, but small things often, to make you feel good.
Yeah, and I think to add to that is this idea of what self-care can be, right? And so I think there's also, when we think about self-care, there's this kind of like a facade of self-care, right? Like I have to have, like the house needs to be clean and quiet, and everything needs to be organized for me to enjoy 5 minutes of self-care. Whereas really thinking about being present, being in the moment. It could be in the shower. It could be 5 minutes in the bathroom. It can be you can be in the car for your self-care, and also thinking through, what tools do you have for yourself? Like you don't have to go out and spend money oftentimes. Folks have this idea around like wanting to create something that, sometimes you just don't have the time to do. And so really thinking about what do you have in your arm's reach? And oftentimes it is deep breathing, a few moments of breathing, centering yourself, some affirmations, visualizations, and 5 minutes of meditation.
It doesn't need to be 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah, I think that's
just 5 minutes. I mean, you can just do a body scan while you're washing the dishes. It doesn't have to be, too onerous. I think if it becomes too onerous, you're not going to do it. And I'd rather the people take, again, these small steps. 5 minutes of meditation is way better than none.
right. I mean, even literally for 1 minute, doing kind of a closing your eyes and just touching your face and your shoulders, the top of your head, like literally just, or running. I find for me, like, even if I am feeling anxious or upset, just running really cold water on my hands, like feeling something different, and then going like, oh, that feels really interesting. And then you're like, oh, that feels good. And so 60 seconds, right? It can even be as short as that. I think, again, those small steps and then opening up more. And I love what you said, like Olivia, that it starts, you're like, oh, this feels good. And it's self-reinforcing. That's interesting too, right? As a concept.
Also, what you're describing is these kind of breaks and allowing yourself to pivot. As opposed to going down the rabbit hole. So,
right.
Take cold water on your hands. It allows you to focus on your hands, not on what's ever going on your mind. And finding these little ways to interrupt the thoughts, I think, are really key.
Yeah. So how does somebody know that it's time to reach out? I think we started at where you said, some people will really white knuckle it, or we might justify all sorts of things, being like, I guess this is how it's supposed to be, or or just keep like, I can't take care of me. I just got to keep going, right? What are some of the signs that, like, how would somebody know it's time to reach out?
The symptoms last more than a couple weeks. If you feel like things aren't turning around, that's one of the ways you can distinguish between, the baby blues and something more serious, something more intense. I'm a visual person, so I imagine, baby blues is more like, the sun's out, but the clouds are passing over the sun. So it's mostly sunny, some challenging times, but by and large, things are pretty good. Whereas if you're experiencing the opposite, where things are mostly cloudy, then I think it's time to reach out for help, and not to white knuckle it, not to suffer, because I think that needless suffering, I think, just perpetuates, and it makes it, who ends up suffering, not just you, but your wider circles. So I think it's, but using that as a sign. If you're not feeling good, if you're feeling distressed, then seek help.
Yeah.
By and large, there's just there's no need to suffer in silence or to feel shamed about it, because, again, I think it's a real demonstration of strength to get help.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're unable to, if you just don't feel like yourself, if you just can't, as Olivia said, if you can't shake it, if others are noticing a shift, and I oftentimes invite, partners and support people in these circles and discussions as well, because they are the ones that often um, are seeing the changes and the shifts as it's happening. And so sometimes we aren't as introspective during these times. And so definitely, having discussion with partners and support people around in the event that you aren't doing well, for them to also be a resource to reach out to for support for you as well.
So can you guys both talk a little bit about if somebody did reach out to you? What would that look like? What does it look like calling a perinatal mental health therapist? How are you going to speak with them or connect with them? Is it virtual, in person? And just what is the process like if somebody were to do that?
For me, if someone were to reach out to me, oftentimes it's via maybe Psychology Today or my website. And what they would do is schedule a 15-minute consultation. And in that consultation is pretty much you sharing with me what made you reach out. And for me, just listening, I would at that point maybe determine whether it is a good fit, or maybe this person, if I'm able to support them, maybe there needs to be a referral to someone else, depending on signs and symptoms and or what has been shared. And then from there, scheduling an appointment. And I think we mentioned a little bit earlier about you start where you want to start, and we take it from there.
I mean, similarly to Jabina, when people reach out to me, I set up a 10 to 15 minute, call. We talk about what's going on. I answer questions about how I work. We see if we're a good fit for each other. Then we move ahead and we schedule an appointment. So, it's fairly painless. But I do think that, making that first call or, reaching out, it can be intimidating. And people are a little nervous. So, in my job when I'm speaking with folks is like I said, to answer their questions, hopefully to set their minds at ease, and to let them know a little bit about, what the process is in terms of therapy. But it can be intimidating, particularly if people haven't had a history of therapy in the past. That stigma kind of creeps up. I shouldn't need this. Why do I need this? Does this mean I'm crazy? And I think that combating that and letting people know, this is a really common condition that people have, whether it's anxiety or depression, or people just want to talk about their family histories, if they want to dig into the past a little bit. This is something that is certainly that's what therapy is all about. But it's really about starting where the client is, and going from there.
And currently, all things are virtual right now. And so I think to answer that part of the question is that our sessions are virtual. And so, yeah.
Yeah, same here.
So if somebody's not quite ready to reach out, we talked a little bit about things people can do, but let's talk a little bit more about, how the anxiety can manifest maybe a little bit, and what are some, or tips and tools that you have for people who they're maybe not ready to, call a therapist, but they would like a few coping skills, or to know even that what they're experiencing is anxiety, or, like sometimes you don't realize that that's what you're experiencing. And then you tell people, eventually somebody, and they're like, oh, you were just having an experience of anxiety. And a lot of people don't even kind of know that, what it is really. So maybe just speak a little bit and some tips so people can leave with some, concrete maybe skills.
I think the feelings of agitation, sleep disturbances, appetite changes, this constant worry around like racing thoughts. And sometimes these are thoughts that you will likely not share with your provider. Oftentimes folks are not sharing intrusive thoughts with their providers around like, I fear that something may happen to my baby, and I often share, I was afraid to drive with my son in the back seat because I always thought he would fly out of the window. And to many, that's like that. What's the likelihood of that happening? But for some new moms, these are the intrusive thoughts. And so as much as folks are not sharing this, may likely not share this information with the provider, it's also important for providers, right, to ask the question about intrusive thoughts. But intrusive thoughts are one that I see folks struggle with a lot. And so that's a question that I'm often asking, you know, if you're having these thoughts that you feel are just weird or bizarre, and, you know, you're feeling really agitated and, you know, frustrated with, you know, your new role, your new identity as a parent, and just not feeling like yourself. I think those are some signs to then move forward with thinking about reaching out to someone.
Yeah, I mean, I always focus on sleep hygiene, just because I find that, again, the sleep is so critical. If you're not sleeping well, everything is harder, everything is more onerous. So I think that looking at ways for people to, you know, people oftentimes, you know, they set their kids up for success because they have a, you know, bedtime routine for the child, but doing the same thing for themselves. So every night, you know, kind of winding yourself down, so getting off your screen an hour before bed, which is hard, I know. You know, I would kind of download the thoughts that are in your mind onto paper. You know, keep a little notepad next to your bed if you want to kind of jot those notes down, things that are kind of swimming around in your head, and make a very conscious decision to say, okay, there's nothing I can do about this right now. I'll handle it tomorrow. You know, so kind of, you're not going to forget it. It's on the paper. You're downloading it from here onto the paper. And that kind of allows you just to kind of, you know, relax and release, and not to have to, because I mean, I see a lot of folks, you know, it's like they're goldfish swimming around a tank. They keep having the same thought again and again and again. I need to remember to do that. I need to remember to do that. Call that person. And instead, if you kind of, again, write it down, then you don't need to do that and stop being the goldfish. I think sometimes too, people, I mean, I see a lot of anxiety, people start to spiral out. So if you can slow things down, you know, interrupt those thoughts by kind of finding a way to interrupt and then to pivot. So one, just a quick tool that people can use that's really easy. You can do it when the baby's in your arms, or, you know, you're starting to kind of get amped up. So slow it down. So take deep breaths. So in for 3, out for 5. And then look around the room and look for everything that's blue. And name it. Talk out loud. When you talk out loud, it allows you to come back to the present, because you're listening to yourself talk. You're not 10 steps ahead. Then look for things that are red. Oh, okay, the book is red, and the blanket is red, and, you know, my shoes are red. And now green. Okay, you know, kind of go through the colors, or you can use the letters of the alphabet. What starts with A? Okay, I see an apple over there. Let's look for B. You know, let's look for a bench. It's just a way. It's a little cognitive game, but it's a way to kind of bring yourself back to the four walls around you, so you can focus on what's going on right here, as opposed to, again, being 10 steps ahead. So those are, you know, just a couple quick tools just to kind of use that I think that might be helpful for people when they do start to spiral out.
Yeah, it's very similar to that. I use square breathing, which is very similar. Breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it for 4 seconds, breathing out for 4 seconds, holding it for 4 seconds.
I didn't know that was called square breathing. I like that. That's a really nice term for it. Thank you. So I guess one of the questions somebody had asked was, you know, what do I say to friends and family who, I'm looking back at what they said, who think I'm fine, and I can seem fine, and right, a lot of people can present sort of as fine, but they're really not fine. Is there some way, like sometimes people want their friends and family, somebody to help actually, but they don't really know how to get that there. Is there anything that you would suggest?
I think for people that are, you know, that you feel that you can trust, you can confide in, because like putting on this facade is exhausting. You know, and if everyone thinks you're fine, they don't really know what's going on the inside. You know, again, I liken this to when you see the woman pushing a stroller and she's all made up and she looks, you know, she looks amazing. You know, I wonder how much work that it took to do that, and at what price, as opposed to, okay, you know. And so I think that, you know, and maybe telling everybody your business and how you're feeling, you know, is not the way to go. But I think, you know, finding the few people that you can confide in, that you know, that you can trust, can make a big difference. Because again, you can just, you know, the effort that people put forth in maintaining this facade and kind of coming across or trying to come across as perfect, I think it takes a toll.
Yeah, absolutely. I often say that fine, how are you? Asking the question, how are you fine, is always a knee-jerking response. And fine can also mean fanatic, insecure, neurotic, and emotional, right? Fine can also mean I'm just like having a bad day. I feel neglected. I feel misunderstood, right? And so, as Olivia said, really finding a trusted group of people or person that you can share and be vulnerable with, to share those feelings of, insecurity or sadness, loneliness that may show up.
By and large, people's intentions are good, but they might not know how to help. They might, and especially if they don't know you're struggling. It's really difficult for them to help. So taking that leap and letting people know, letting people in a little bit, I think can be helpful. And I think also being directive. This is what I need right now. I need a shoulder. I just need to vent right now. I just need to cry, or I need to laugh. Let's go watch a comedy. Finding people with whom you can really be open and be, again, explicit about what your needs are, without feeling like, again, there's some shame or some stigma in that, because people can't read your mind. They really don't know what's going on, and I'd like to believe that most people's intentions are good. They don't want to see you struggling. But if they don't know that you are, then they can't help.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. One more question from a parent that came in. Can you think you have anxiety for a bunch of things that are non-child related, but actually be dealing with perinatal anxiety?
Well, I think technically, if it's happening during the perinatal time, it's perinatal anxiety. Technically. But I mean, I think that oftentimes it'll roll over into, if you're an anxious person in the past, you have anxiety or a history of anxiety, and then now you're pregnant and now you have a new child. Again, it tends to roll over. Your anxiety tends to land someplace, and unfortunately, it tends to land, whatever is most pressing. So obviously, having a child or being pregnant is pretty, pretty life altering, pretty pressing. So I would not be surprised, again, if it kind of finds its way. But that being said, I mean, a lot of the same things that we've been discussing, apply. If you have kind of more generalized anxiety, how do you address that? I mean, the therapy can be really helpful. And so again, the things that you can do about this, you don't need to just suffer.
Yeah. And for people, I guess, as we'll maybe just do one or two more questions. And I just want to, again, thank everybody for coming out tonight. And I've been kind of dropping different links and things from Olivia Bergeron and Jabina Coleman. And also I'm going to put if you guys are on Instagram, feel free to grab out your phones and follow us at GetBoober, at the lactation therapist. And Olivia, do you have remind me, an Instagram, or you
so olivia.bergeron.nyc.
I'll put that in as well. So I'm going to drop those all in. So we would love it if you would follow us all. We all do different things in teaching and tips and support, and sometimes a light moment. On the flip side, can we talk for a minute about social media? Because it came up before. And I actually think that social media can really deeply contribute to anxiety and depression. And sometimes we just need to turn that off. Do you agree? Yeah, I see some head nods. How would you help a parent? Because I think, I know there's a lot, it's interesting on Instagram as well. There are some more approaches of trying to be honest about our bodies, right? And about what motherhood or parenthood is like. And you'll see people sometimes being a bit messier than we might have in the past. Although it's still also very curated, I think, and I know that as somebody who sometimes does my own social media, how stressful it is just to be in that cycle of doing it and putting it out, right? So everybody out there who's watching social media or doing it yourself, there's a lot of work and thought that's going behind it, or energy and time. And so a new parent who is putting all of that energy there, or maybe trying to connect with other people there, because sometimes we can't, but it can be, I just find there's huge burnout that can happen, and stress and anxiety and depression. So have you ever had to counsel any of your parents to turn that off?
Yeah, I think taking a social media break, especially during the first few weeks postpartum, is for some people can be very helpful. And, really cleaning up your social media around what information you want to receive, because oftentimes you get wrapped up, right? So people get wrapped up in the snapback of as soon as I have a baby, I have to have this amazing body, and my body needs to snap back, or my baby needs to look a certain way, or, my house, or, just these images that we continue to feed ourselves, that oftentimes are a snapshot and oftentimes not realistic. And I think Olivia mentioned it earlier, like you don't know what happened 10 seconds before that shot and the 10 seconds right after that shot. And many of us know what that's like, right? You know, trying to get this perfect shot of this newborn baby and, you know, wanting to post and having to put makeup on in the postpartum period and all of those things. And knowing that the stressors that come with that, giving yourself that time to breathe and step away from social media, and or creating an account for yourself that has like, you know, there are a lot of great groups out there now that are supporting the rawness in new parenthood. And, you know, and some pages and accounts that are great with doing that. And so maybe creating something for yourself so that you can, what comes up on your timeline, you know? So I think it's important. I'll tell people, let's take a social media break. And what does that look like? And, or if you can't turn it off completely, how do we minimize that? You know, especially like that first thing in the morning and right before bed, you know? And so really thinking about how do we incorporate that during your day?
I think take a look at how you feel after. You know,
Mm.
when you're on the, you know, Instagram or Facebook or what have you, you know, do you leave feeling just depleted and awful and you feel worse about yourself than when you started out? Okay, that to me is indicative. It's not a great thing to be participating in, at least for right now. And this could be temporary. I think, you know, the break that Jabina talked about, you know, shutting it down, you know, for now, and not checking it for now. This is a temporary situation. But again, if for the first few weeks or months, that you just need to kind of step away from that, you know, allowing yourself to do that and not feeling like, again, I should be staying on top of this. Yeah, there are many other things you could be doing. But I think, you know, it's a challenge. If your whole family's you know, on Facebook, your friends are there, that's where you want to post pictures, and people are asking you, you know, to send pictures, and it could be a challenge to kind of, you know, yeah, to step away. But I do think, again, if you're leaving feeling really depleted and just, you know, either more anxious or, you know, just not good about yourself or your family or the state of the world, then I do think giving yourself permission again to step away, at least temporarily.
Yeah, thank you. So in our last couple minutes, I think just anything that either of you want to share, you know, bits of advice, thoughts for, especially again, a lot of pregnant people here. We do have some people with babies as well, but I think maybe a bit of advice for somebody who's pregnant right now, and support, words of support or thoughts, and if somebody does have a baby and is feeling like they are needing some support.
That you're not alone. And you, with help and support, you will get through this. That is, you know, I think what folks need to know, right? That this is very common, changes in mood during and after pregnancy, and that there are resources and support out there for you to, you know, move through this journey of parenthood. Yeah.
Agreed. I think, you know, self-care is not selfish. Taking the time, you know, to take care of yourself, you know, pays dividends, and it's key. And I think that, again, using your child or your future child as an example, you wouldn't want to see them struggling on their own. You would want them to reach out for help. So how do you do that? You model that first. You know, you do that for yourself. You take these steps, you know, to take care of yourself. So again, so that you can best take care of your family. And that, again, that's not weakness. Doesn't mean there's something, you know, bad or wrong with you. You know, people experience perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, and it's not your fault. You know, we don't really know why per se it happens to some people and not others. You know, there are definitely theories, but I think that knowing that it's very treatable, there's something you can do about it, and don't hesitate to get help.
Absolutely. And I think something that I stand by is just thinking through, like, everyone wants to hold the baby. Like, who will hold the mother? And in what ways do you need to be held? And so it's really important to understand what your needs are, being able to voice them, identify them, and share them.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. And thank you to everybody. I've slowly faded into darkness. I'm in a place where I normally am not, and realized I didn't turn on my overhead light but I'm happy I have the computer here. It's been fun watching that happen. Thank you so much to both Olivia Bergeron and Jabina Coleman for really sharing some really great thoughts and tips and support. Thank you, Kristen. I'm so glad that this was helpful out there for you. Dropped a bunch of links. You can find Olivia is actually on the Booper platform and does some of the screening, and could potentially support you or match you elsewhere if it's not a good fit. We always say, right, we're looking for a good fit. Jabina, you can find at thelactationtherapist.com, which I dropped in. I dropped in all of our Instagram handles as well. So I hope you will follow us there. And then those of you who are here attending at the Hatch event, lots more events coming up through Hatch. We have a fantastic infant CPR class coming up. I believe maybe it's even tomorrow. But you can look at the Hatch community section on the website, digital community, to find lots and lots more wonderful talks throughout this month. So if we can be supportive to you at Boober, even if we can't match you to somebody, they're not on our platform, we will still try to help find you wherever, find you that help wherever you are. Join us for other classes over at getboober.com. And we hope that we will see you all again soon. Thank you so much, everybody. And I'd love to take a picture with the two of you before we go, so I can put that on in my darkness. If that's cool. One second. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to close it out, but great to see you both.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.